I'm Becky McCoy, and you're listening to Stories of Unfolding Grace, the podcast about grace during unexpected times. You'll hear from real people dealing with hard stuff, and I hope you'll feel encouraged that you can bravely live through hard stuff too. You're listening to episode 5 of Stories of Unfolding Grace. I'm talking with Michelle Tolson, a former Miss New Hampshire and a former Rockette, about her diagnosis with multiple sclerosis. You can find the show notes at beckylmccoy.com/05. Okay, so I'm here with Michelle Tolson. She is responsible for helping to keep me sane through 4 years of college.
It was my pleasure.
Yes. Michelle was teaching tap and other dance genres at Wagner College while I was a student there. So, Michelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about a difficult season that you experienced?
Well, I've had a pretty great career. I'm 42 years old. I was a professional dancer for 6 years with the Radio City Rockettes, but I've always been a teacher, and that's always been my love. And as you know, that's what my passion's at. And dancing to Whitney Houston is one of those passions,
That's right.
as you know. And any of my students will tell you that.
Yes, that is a very true story.
Or Tony Braxton.
Right.
I turned 40 a couple years ago, and I was having an eye issue, and I have reading glasses, so I thought I just needed to get new glasses. And when I went into my doctor, he didn't see any issues with it, so suggested I see a specialist for glaucoma, cataracts, that type of stuff, and I appreciated that. So went to the specialist who dilated me without letting me know that was going to happen, and that's always fun to be dilated in New York City, trying to get on the subway.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And I had to film a video that day, even more interesting. Couldn't read the script. But after leaving their office and them doing their tests, they didn't see anything. So they wanted me to have an MRI to see the optic nerve. They thought there might be some inflammation that was causing this blurriness. It kind of was like a disco ball in my left eye. It didn't hurt, a little sensitive to light, but just kind of felt like there was something always in my vision.
Huh.
So I started this in January 2 years ago, and in February they sent me for an MRI. And I remember at 5 o'clock on a Friday night in February being told by my eye doctor, that they thought I had MS after seeing the MRI because of the lesions on the brain. And so they suggested I see a neurologist. So I had all weekend to think I had everything under the sun and or try to find out what MS was, because it's not on my radar, and you don't hear a lot of talk about it. And my husband and I just were WebMDing and Googling and anything you could think of to find out what MS is. And it's confusing. It's not a straightforward disease, unfortunately.
Right.
And we got into a neurologist that following Tuesday, a lovely older gentleman who said, get a second opinion. You should always have a second opinion. We got into NYU that Thursday, and that doctor, a young, lovely woman who I really like, said, we're going to send you for MRIs of your neck and spine. And so this was now beginning of March, and on St. Patrick's Day 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with MS definitively, showing more lesions on brain, neck, and spine. So, not what you expect to hear when you just turn 40. It's not one of those things that's usually diagnosed that late. It's usually diagnosed at the end of high school to beginning of college years, which is really awful.
Yeah. Holy cow.
But it can be diagnosed up to 40, so I had to, get the end of it, lucky me.
Mm-hmm.
And for 6 months, I kind of put it out of my mind. I had a great doctor who said, we're going to start you on this medication called Texidera. It's a pill. So when you just have to take a pill for an illness, it doesn't kind of feel like your illness is as awful as it is, if you will.
Right.
So my husband took it much harder than I did the first 6 months, as he's, we got married in 2009, and he knows that I've been a dancer all my life, and that's my passion, and teaching. I still teach, even though I hold a full-time job in New York City. I still go to Jersey to teach on Saturdays.
Yep.
He thought, and my mom did too, that I would be in a wheelchair, pretty soon.
Yeah. So talk more about, what was your reaction emotionally getting this diagnosis that could definitely impact your career.
Yeah. Well, I shut down. I didn't realize I shut down. My husband took it really hard. And I actually had to have him call my mother because I knew she was going to think I was going to be in a wheelchair the next day. My mom just turned 75, and she's from Spain, and it's an old school mentality. MS never had a very good outlook until about 10 years ago.
Okay.
But like I said, so my doctor put me on a pill, and so for the first 6 months I took a pill twice a day, and I was like, yeah, I'm taking care of myself.
Right, it's
and
good.
I'm still dancing, and I don't feel so bad. And then I had my 6-month follow-up, which showed more new lesions on my brain.
Yikes.
And that's when she decided that she was going to be aggressive with me, and that's one of the reasons I went with her. She knows I do PR in New York City, and she knows that I still teach and I judge and travel and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So she switched me to Sabri, which is infusion therapy. So for people that don't know, infusion therapy means I go to the center every 28 days, and I get hooked up just like a chemo patient does, except my medication isn't like a poison. My medication is supposed to make me better.
Right.
So it's done. Right. It's done as chemo does. It's just killing some of your immune system at the same time. So my immune system is already compromised. That's part of the problem with MS. My body's attacking itself. It's attacking the nerve endings. The myelin that's wrapped around your nerves is what's stripped away when I have a flare-up of something that happens. And so once the myelin is stripped away, it heals, and it leaves a lesion or a scar. And so now what happens is you don't have the same passageway through your nerve endings. And so that's what's caused people to have limps or to have to be in a wheelchair or to have slurred speech or to have blurriness in your eye.
Yeah,
it depends on where your lesions are, if it's brain, neck, or spine.
Okay.
And because you're not getting the right communication through the nerve endings anymore, that's what causes all these issues. So I get, 6 months into this, I have new lesions, and so now we're going to do infusion therapy. And so now I'm like, oh, I really do have a problem. I don't just have an allergy.
Yeah. Did that feel like getting like a new diagnosis all over again?
Oh, totally did. It felt like getting punched in the stomach. And I had my first breakdown, and that's when I started posting on social media. I decided that to face it for me, I was going to have to be public with it. I hadn't really been public about my diagnosis because of the stigma on it, because I was afraid that if people thought I had MS, I wouldn't be able to hold my job or continue to teach.
Yeah.
And so I told my closest friends and I told my family, but I didn't really tell outside that little group. And so when I first went in for my first infusion over a year ago, I decided to post a picture of what I was doing.
Yeah, and I remember that day. Isn't that crazy? Like, I remember that day, and it wasn't even like me.
And it was the best thing I ever did for myself, because I faced a fear. First of all, I hate needles, and that was one of the reasons she originally put me on a pill. I have a real hard time with needles, and I have small veins, and they roll, and I'm not, hydrated enough. So we've had some real issues with this, but I've gotten much better with that. And having people that reach out to you while you're in your treatment makes the treatment go by so much faster and makes you feel like a superwoman. It's so good to know that I have a group of people that I don't see every day. I mean, I know Facebook is like a separate world. You don't see a lot of these people you talk to on Facebook daily, but it feels like I have that support network that I need every time I go into my treatment. And that's when I really started to face my disease. And that's when I became much more of an advocate and an educator with MS, and decided to do my first walk. And now I am a spokesperson for the MS Society. So that's how it kind of went from I don't have anything to, I so have something, and I'm going to let you know what it is.
Right. So what did you struggle most? What was the hardest part of getting a diagnosis, having an unsuccessful treatment, starting a different treatment? What was the hardest struggle with all of that?
MS is, I just did a post yesterday, you probably saw. MS is it's so uncertain. You don't know when it's going to attack. You don't know when you're going to get a new symptom. You don't know what the symptom's going to cause. You don't know how long you have to be like you are functioning. And that's been the toughest part of me. I am a planner, which sounds weird because a lot of people are like, really? You're pretty spontaneous. No, I lay my day out. I my school year is September to June as a teacher, even though I work, a regular job. I know I can see in my calendar what I have planned for the year. I know when I'm judging dance competitions. I know when I need to be somewhere to teach. And having this sort of disease doesn't allow you to necessarily plan that far ahead because you don't know how your health is going to be. So it's helped me, sounds weird, be a little more spontaneous and a little bit more spur of the moment. It's also taught me to listen to your body more. And that was one of the things I talked about yesterday in my post, that I really wanted to be at a charity show the studio I work for in Jersey was having. And I taught on Saturday 9 to 5. And I got home around 7 to the city, and I felt the numbness in my legs and swelling in my knee. And I wasn't sure if I could push through for Sunday. And I woke up Sunday, and as much as I wanted to be there with my students, I had to listen to what my body was telling me, and I didn't end up going to their charity show. And it broke my heart, and I felt like I let them down. But my students and parents all know what I'm going through, and not one of them felt that way or posted anything.
Of course,
they said,
we always feel worse than the situation is. Like, more
it definitely
guilty.
is. And
yeah.
My boss she's wonderful, Vanessa Berry. She donated. The first time I posted about doing the walk, she was my first donation, and I only thought I would make $1,000, and she gave me $1,000.
Holy cow!
She donated within the 6 minutes I had posted last year, and she was the second one this year to do it again and donated again $1,000. So she's been a huge supporter of me and what I do, and she understands the illness. She just put a whole segment together, a photo session that I did with a student and her mom. Her mom has a progressive form of MS, and I have the less aggressive form of MS, and her daughter dances with me. So we were able to connect on that level, and she, shares that story with people at the studio, which I think is wonderful.
Wow. Bravely and authentically is important to me, and I'm guessing it's something you are interested in too. You can learn more about my story at my blog, beckylmccoy.com. Stop by and sign up to receive my monthly newsletter. It includes all sorts of interesting tidbits and family updates. Check the show notes for details. Your help with something. If you're enjoying Stories of Unfolding Grace, please share it with your friends and subscribe in iTunes. If you leave a rating, it'll help other listeners to find the podcast. Thanks so much for being on this journey with me. So in what ways during the last couple years have you seen grace? I'm using this definition of grace, like good things happening during really bad times. How have you seen that happen?
Well, my world definitely has opened up. I face the thought of losing my legs daily. That's always in my mind. And I know a lot of people are like, well, I mean, you could still get around, you could still, eat. But
like, that's not the point. It doesn't have anything to do with it.
As you know, as a dancer, and especially a tap dancer, the thought of losing your legs, it's losing my passion, my artistry, my heart, if you will.
Yeah.
So that, again, was my post yesterday, fear of losing what you know, but it's also taught me so much more of accepting what you have right now, not being afraid to take risks, because you don't know if you're going to be able to do what you can right now, tomorrow. So live as fully as you can, and don't be afraid to reach out when you need help, because I've been very stubborn in that way. Oh, I'm fine. No, I'm good. But I'm not. My legs hurt. Can I get a massage? I can't. I'm so tired today. I can't come down and teach. When I would have in the past extended myself, overextended myself.
Right.
I've learned to say no. I've learned to ask for help. I've learned there's a reason that everything does happen. And the reason I think that I was diagnosed now was to help educate and spread awareness. But I also know how lucky I am to be diagnosed in 2014, because there are 9 new medications that came on the market in the last 10 years, and my medications are working in my system. The woman that I teach her daughter did not have access to these medications, and she's in a wheelchair. So I understand how fortunate or how blessed I am that it happened to me now.
Right.
And a lot of people don't. They're like, how can you say that? I said, because I'm still working and I'm still walking, and there's still so much hope, and there's so much research and education happening now.
Yeah.
Had it been 15 years ago when I first met you, I wouldn't be. And that's where I feel truly blessed.
Yeah. Yeah, that really is amazing. As a result of your diagnosis, how do you feel like you've been able to live bravely and authentically in ways that you didn't before?
Well, I think social media teaches you a lot about that, as you know. Like I said, I document my infusions monthly on Instagram and Facebook, but I'm a pretty positive person. I've had, some crappy things happen in my life, and this is just another challenge for me, another obstacle. But about 6 months into treatment, maybe 7 months, it was over the summer. I was really dehydrated, and they couldn't get the IV in, and I just didn't want to be there. It hurt, and I didn't do a post that day, and I didn't take a picture. And then I thought about it for a couple of days, and then I finally did a post about it, how awful it was, and how much I hated MS, and how much I didn't want to have it, and I don't understand. And then I realized, you know what? I'm going to get through this, and putting that post up made a lot of people see me differently, and I believe it helped a lot of people, because not everything is sunshine and unicorns and rainbows.
Right.
It's life, and you can be as positive as you want, and you are super positive, Miss Becky. But
oh, well, thank you.
There are some days that no matter what you do, it's going to be gray, and it's going to look rainy to you, even if it's sunny outside. And there's some days you just can't get out of that funk. But realizing you're in the funk is the best way to get out of the funk. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned through this whole thing. That's
great. And that's why I wanted to start this podcast, too, is just for people to realize that life is hard. And there's nothing you can do you can't skip the hard parts. They happen. And it's just, how do you choose to handle it?
And that's one of the things I love about you. People make up their Facebook world. If you look at a lot of people on Facebook, their life looks perfect.
Yeah, it's so curated.
Right, and this is what they're choosing to share. And with you and with myself, I'm choosing to share both. Some days are great, and some days aren't. And that's true life to me. And I think that we need to be more authentic in what we share.
Yeah, totally. So if someone were to come up to you and they had just been diagnosed with MS, or really any diagnosis that was going to impact their passions and their career, how would you encourage them to handle it?
Well, I think having a great doctor that you can trust and communicate with is number one, because you need to have somebody you can call or email any time of day with a disease that's ridiculous, chronic and progressive, and you just never know what's going to happen. So having a doctor you can feel like that will listen to you and communicate with you, and getting on the best health plan for you, whatever that means, whatever medication you need to be on, whatever diet. I mean, diet, nutrition plays so much into it. Yep. Keeping your stress down, but also having a support group, and not necessarily your friends or your husband or your wife. Sometimes you need to go out of that, because they don't understand what you're going through. Yeah. They want to, and I appreciate that, but they don't unless they have an illness of their own. They're not going to get it, so they're not going to understand your frustration. So finding a support group that works, and finding one for your loved ones, because my husband goes to a support group for people that are caretakers of someone with MS. Because he faces his own challenges. I don't know what it's like to think that your spouse is going to get worse every day.
Right.
I only know what it's like for me to think I might get worse every day. I don't know what goes on in his head and the challenges he faces. So we try not to let that stress eat up our relationship. We take care of that on our own by going to the correct support groups for each other. He does his, I do mine, and that's a big help and a stress reliever for us, because we don't want to vent or get upset with one another. So
I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like people don't understand how much support the caregiver needs.
And that's what we talk about often.
Yeah.
You know, it's so hard. He doesn't have to physically do things for me yet, but he does a lot for me emotionally. He doesn't want to see me stressed because stress causes flare up. I mean, stress is just terrible for everything, as we know. But
right. But in addition,
he just, you know, he's got to live with that constant. I'm not sure when she might get sick or worse, or you know. So that's got to be eating away at him too, and I can't help him with that because I'm thinking, well, I don't know when I'm going to get sick, so what can I do now?
Right.
You know, so they have a big role in, and as the disease progresses, it gets worse on the caretaker. It gets worse on both people, but you know,
in different ways. Yeah.
And it can change the relationship, and it already changed ours because unfortunately, some of the lesions cause you to have numbness or lesser feeling in your arms and legs, so you just don't like to be touched. And I didn't realize that for a few months I would be brushing him off or pushing him away because I just knew I was uncomfortable. But for a spouse, they felt rejected, and so we had to deal with that.
Right.
I didn't realize I was doing it. He didn't know why I was doing it because I wasn't communicating that this doesn't feel good anymore.
Yep.
So it can take its toll on its marriage or relationship or whatever partnership that you're in. So being honest and getting the help that you need is so important when dealing with something like this.
Yeah.
But don't lose your sense of humor because if you do, it's a really long, dreary road. Any illness like this has its moments of funniness, and you've got to find those moments.
Yeah. For sure. Well, thank you for being so open about your challenges.
Well, thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions for you, and these are more on the fun side of things. So the first is, what are you loving right now? What gets you really excited?
Whitney Houston. She still does. I don't care.
Always.
I think some of it you'll know. Seeing a student get a step, seeing a student find their creativity. I remember you working on one of your pieces, and you were one of the first to come out with Norah Jones. You were tapping to Norah Jones, and this was before people were. I didn't. I remember, this is really cool. Somebody's hearing something that other people aren't. And so seeing that and being a part of that process and my students feeling free to express themselves to me either artistically or speaking to me about whatever, that gets me jazzed. I mean, I love working in New York City, but it's the students that keep me going.
Yeah. That's great. What is your favorite meal or favorite food right now?
Well, we're trying to clean up how we eat, so it's much more, chicken, fish, salad. But if I could have my favorite meal, it's a steak medium rare, asparagus, hollandaise sauce, and a chocolate souffle with a glass of red wine.
Yeah, can't argue with that. What are you doing to take care of yourself?
Well, like I just said, we don't get to eat that much anymore. My husband's the cook in the house. I don't like to cook. I like to bake. So he has taken to cooking with, just much better things. We got rid of butter and things and seasoning differently, and we've drastically reduced salt and just trying to stay active, as in walking more. I hate the gym, but I do love that I live by Central Park, so we go walking in the park or go walking around the neighborhood. Just staying active is good for anything.
Yeah, that's great.
So being outside, getting in the sun, just doing the things you should do that we take for granted.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last question is, what are you doing to be brave?
Talking to you, number one. Yeah, it's not easy to talk about something that you don't want to have.
Yeah. It makes it more real.
Yeah, being honest about it on social media, like my post yesterday about having fear in my life, and being a part of the MS Society, more so being their spokesperson. It was really scary to come out and say I have this disease. I didn't want people to look at me any differently, and I actually think that people look at me differently in a positive way, not a negative way.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That's taught me a lot about being brave. But I think being brave, and this is the message I would want people to understand, when things don't feel good in your body, have it checked, because a lot of us are afraid to go to the doctor. And if we don't, and mine was just an eye, I never would have thought that my eye meant I had MS. It's those things that we overlook. So I want people to be brave and take care of themselves and listen to their bodies.
Yeah, that's a great tip, because I know so many people even Keith, both times he was sick, it was weird
Right.
things. Like,
Right.
you just wouldn't have known.
Right.
So-
So, like I said, I never would have thought that because I had a blurry left eye, I had lesions on my brain. But I just, I try to, as I'm getting older and like 42, I try to make sure I do at least the things, the maintenance, if you will,
Right.
that you need to do every year. And an eye exam is maintenance.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky that I knew it was time to get my eyes examined. But I didn't stop at the exam when my eye doctor said, I think you should go to a specialist. I didn't say, no, I'm okay. I said, okay, because your health is all you can control. And and I wanted to live as good a quality of life as I can. So that means let's go to the specialist. That's not a big deal. Let's take care of it. And this is where I am now, but at least I know, and at least I can take care of myself now moving forward. So be brave. Don't be afraid to go to the doctor, even though it sucks.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you again, Michelle, and I will include your social media information so people can follow your story and a link to the MS Society if they want to learn more about that in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Next time on Stories of Unfolding Grace, I talk with Molly Janatazio about a possible career-ending injury.
When I described it to people, they were like, wait, what? Like, that really happened? And I was like, yeah. And one of my friends was like, wow, you are, like, really unlucky. And all of a sudden, it was like, I have one more shot to play all out, and I'm not going to take it?
If you're interested in sharing your story of unfolding grace, head to my blog, beckylmccoy.com, and click on the submissions button. I can't wait to hear from you. Thanks again for joining me. I'm really looking forward to next week.